You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Runaway. Watching it with me is Dean Newman from the Daily Jaws. Hi Dean, how are you?
Hi Rich, good, thank you.
Well, welcome back. This is your first time on the podcast since the Cannibal Run. As an introduction to this film, I'll admit I'd never seen it before. And I remember it was around the time that we did the last podcast that I'd seen it pop up on iTunes. And as I put it on Twitter, you were giddy like a schoolboy at the prospect of doing this one. What's your memories of the Tom Selleck vehicle Runaway?
For me, it kind of evokes sort of really strong memories of sort of like a Saturday night on BBC One when they kind of used to show sort of big films sort of around that time. I know that was one of them, and you know, you could guarantee during that season it'd be like Blue Thunder, War Games, or even that other great Michael Crichton 80s film Looker. And like most Michael Crichton stuff, it's sort of like more pertinent today than it kind of ever was, really. I hadn't seen it for ages, probably about 20 years, so it was a great delight to kind of get reacquainted with it, and I think it holds up remarkably well. Obviously, some stuff's really dated, but it's one of those films that's got a great core idea, and I'm sure at some point, like most of the things, it'll end up getting remade at some point, just because of the whole drone thing and robots and computers. You know, it's more pertinent than ever, and I think that's probably the main reason that I still don't have a robot lawnmower, because of Runaway. And I think as well, when I was growing up, I think it was the main reason I didn't have any Zoids, just because it reminds me of those spiders.
Well, it's funny because this film came out the same year as Terminator, and I suppose they're very closely linked, albeit vastly different beasts. And yet, as you say, this film was written and directed by Michael Crichton, who I suppose is most famous for Jurassic Park, also writing Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And now this film, so released in the US anyway in 1984, and it was set in the very vague the near future. Now, I don't remember seeing at any point what year this was actually set in.
No, I don't recall seeing that either. I just kind of felt like it was like, maybe 10, 15 years further on from sort of 1984. That seemed to be because, you know, everyone was driving sort of pretty much normal cars apart from the police, which had laser cannons and stuff in it, but I might touch on that later. But yeah, everything kind of seemed pretty much normal, and you know, there was nothing kind of outlandish Demolition Man style.
Just to read the synopsis from IMDb, I made it quite clear that I couldn't wait to see it, and my wife went, "Nah, you can have that one." I'll read it out now. It's in the near future, a police officer specialises in malfunctioning robots. When a robot turns out to have been programmed to kill, he begins to uncover a homicidal plot to create killer robots, and his son becomes a target. That's pretty awesome.
It sounds great, you know. Essentially, that's like iRobot, essentially the Will Smith version, not the book, obviously, but it still sounds brilliant. And also, it's got Tom Selleck.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, you know, obviously he was trying to carve out. Obviously, he didn't get the Indiana Jones role, so then he kind of did like. They said take the high road. Oh, it is take the high road to China, not take the high road. That's the Scottish soap.
That would have been a very different show. Well, I guess the prospect of seeing Tom Selleck in a police uniform and not driving around Hawaii wearing a very loud Hawaiian shirt, or driving a Ferrari even, must have been very strange to some people. I guess that's not what people thought of Tom Selleck. He's trying to get away from being typecast.
Yeah, no, it was. And I think, you know, he'd got. I think the moustache was styled differently, so there was that kind of crucial. You know, obviously needed to get into character. So I think it was obviously a regulation moustache, and I think it was just great. And as I say, everyone was kind of into Magnum PI. So for me, around that period, it was a bit like Roy Scheider, really. If Roy Scheider was in it or Tom Selleck was in it, I'd kind of give it a go. I even gave Lasseter a go, but I don't think I lasted all the way through that. But I know during that period, he was kind of trying out all different genres, and then obviously kind of ended up with sort of 3 Men and a Baby, and then kind of ended up doing a few more of those kind of sort of comedy films. Although he did do An Innocent Man, which was kind of like, again, kind of linking in with Harrison Ford. I guess that was like his version of presumed innocent, I guess.
I mean, it's strange that this coming out in 1984, the same time as Terminator, basically two films about killer robots. It's very reminiscent of the whole Deep Impact and Armageddon saga, with two films with very similar plot lines coming out at the same time. But it also shows the difference between the fact that Terminator has gone on to be one of the most popular science fiction films of all time, and this, it was bloody fun. I'm not going to give that away. And I only found it while waiting for my wife to have a baby. But it was good fun, but you can see why Terminator went on to be the roaring success, and this was, as you say, a Saturday evening BBC jobby.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like proper B-movie stuff, and you know, it's kind of similar, I guess, to other films of that time, like Trancers and things like that, where it wasn't perfect, but you knew it had a great story, and it was always interesting, whether it's the sort of flying bullets or the sort of robot spiders and things like that. So I always had something interesting. And I think that was always the thing with Michael Crichton. I think that was where the beauty of him being both the writer and director. I know you mentioned, obviously, Jurassic Park, which is sort of like what most people will remember him for today. But I know for me, it was always that kind of before that, it was that holy trinity of Westworld, Yul Brynner. Again, robots go amok in a theme park. So mixing both Runaway and Jurassic Park. Looker, which was another early 80s film. That's a brilliant kind of tech noir with Albert Finney and James Coburn, and sort of about plastic surgery and the way people look. Again, more pertinent today. And then obviously this. Although he did also direct the late 70s conspiracy thriller Coma, which, interestingly enough, Tom Selleck had a very brief sort of appearance in that as a body that was in suspended animation or something. But he was kind of in that briefly.
The film opens with the credits of microchips and bits of computer code, which in 1984 probably looked super advanced. But Tom Selleck is a police sergeant, seems to have a knack for fiddling with old toasters and robots and stuff. And even his sort of housemaid is basically a robot who talks and has some sort of almost sentient being too. I do find it an awful waste of resources that a police sergeant on a police sergeant's salary is responsible for fiddling with microchips. I'm sure they could find some civilian member of staff who would probably be a lot cheaper to employ to do this job for them. Or, you know, if it was set in 2018, they could just outsource it to the Group 4.
Yeah, well, maybe because it was early 80s, maybe they just thought, you know, California Highway Patrol, and just thought microchips. So maybe it was kind of just related to that. So he's, you know, still police related.
The standard bit of exposition in there, though, as to sort of why, because the new girl, you know, we'll call her the new girl. I know it's not politically correct, but in 1984, she's wearing a skirt, which of course was the done thing back then. Captain Harris from Police Academy makes an appearance. He's a lot more understated than Captain Harris.
Yeah, and I think as well, it is full of so many 80s faces. You say you've got those two. You've got, as Tom Selleck's son, you've got the kid from Flight of the Navigator, obviously before he went off the rails. and also in one scene, you've got a security guard who is actually played by Data's dad from the Goonies, and that's kind of quite interesting. Yeah, he was in a great TV series with G.W. Bailey called Major Crimes, which I think they're in that for about 8 years, and that was a spin-off itself from The Closer, so that's well worth catching out. I think also there's another kind of cop who's like a bit techie and things, and he played like the cop partner in Monster Squad. So it's, you know, full of so many familiar faces, and obviously Kirstie Alley as well, which was I'd completely forgot she was in it. Although I think she's really hammy in it. She's terrible.
So she makes an appearance and has a lot of screen time in a brief part of the film, but say for the first probably half of the film we don't meet her, but the first sort of 10 minutes or so there is that exposition where we're explaining that Jack Ramsey, I mean, what an 80s cop name that is, he is working with this gadgets because he had an incident because he was scared of heights, and a suspect got away from him and killed a family, so of course he has demons. If this was Liam Neeson, he'd have gone off on some sort of murderous rampage, but Tom Selleck's a lot more reserved than this, I think. Their first sort of call is and this is more standard. It's a standard Runaway call, which is just nice use of the film name, where they have to go to a wheat field and rescue a runaway sort of corn picker or something like that. It's a little bit weird. But then we go back to the office, they sort of have a laugh, and then the next call comes in and it's a homicide. Which I believe is the first ever homicide committed by a robot. They go down to the scene of the crime and there's already a woman been killed inside the house, where a machine capable of holding a .357 Magnum has scared the dad out of the house, leaving his 10-month-old child. Of course, here comes Selleck, dressed as the Knight Templar from Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, and he's also got a drone which will help him out. And of course the evil machine looks like one of those old OHP overhead projectors we used to have at school. Bit of a throwback to that 1984 there.
Oh, the one with the one we put the acetate on them?
Yeah, it was weird seeing something my history teacher used to use, brandishing a gun like Dirty Harry.
It is. I mean, it looks like something that even Uncle Owen wouldn't buy in Star Wars. It's sort of like, put that back on the bloody thing. It's. And there were some particular shit items in the Star Wars, in that particular Star Wars scene. But it does outshit them. Although saying that, I do think that scene is particularly tense, and I think that they ramp it up. And obviously the cameraman, when he goes in, it kind of he buys it. So it's sort of like, these machines aren't fucking about. And I think as well, to 11, I guess, is that there's a baby in there. So it really does. It's the sort of thing that, even though there's a silly robot in there, it kind of really grounds it in that kind of reality that still work today. And I thought that scene was particularly effective. And in some ways, I think that they would have been better off opening with that rather than the silly jolly japes with the robotic threshing machine or whatever it was. Just because I think that really helped, for me, sort of set the tone as it being sort of like, wow, this is sort of like, although it's a light action sort of sci-fi adventure film, that was kind of like probably the most tense scene in there, really. And it was, I think it was really well done. Of course, what we soon realise is that the bloke is a technician for the evil corporation owned by Gene Simmons, and there is a reason why that his house is being targeted. Simmons looking very much like a demented Billy Zane, and it turns out that this guy has been working with another technician to develop a evil strain of microchips to make robots go bad. It's a bit like the beginning of The Spy Who Loved Me, with the two technicians developing the technology, who Stromberg tries to bump off pretty quickly. What did you make of Gene Simmons in this?
It's almost like Dennis Hopper must have watched that before he decided to do Speed or something. It's that kind of, or what's his name? Ham Tyler from V. Michael Ironside. I think only Michael Ironside probably beats him in outlandish performance-wise for kind of Highlander 2. But it kind of lends itself to this film, I think. It is quite, I think even when I was little when I saw it, he was quite menacing and disturbing without being sort of like Skeletor or anything like that. And he looked normal-ish. Yeah, there's something kind of like odd and off-kilter about him. Obviously, I know microchips were like the size of credit cards back then. You were going to look at things, dates them really quickly. Those kind of early, mid-80s films. You had to look at the microchips in, state-of-the-art microchips in A View to a Kill. But these spiders, you'd think they'd almost be smaller, but they're kind of like the size of a mini metro. It's sort of like they are quite huge. So be finding difficult places where to kind of hide them and keep them out of people's sight. And they must make an awful racket as well.
Because the other guy from the crime scene, the guy whose wife died, Tom Selleck tries to basically take him into custody to protect him from Gene Simmons. This just sounds really weird if you use their actor names and not character names. But yeah, and when he sees Simmons sort of lurking at the hot dog stand, he decides to run off, and Dr. Luther shoots this really bloody weird rocket bullet thing that we essentially find out is a heat-seeking missile. It's quite clever.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I know the Monday morning after seeing that or after renting it out, that was why you rented that film, for even if you didn't know the name of the film, it'd be like, have you seen that film with the flying bullet? But obviously it's someone running around with a camera and then it's kind of speeded up or whatever, it's a miniature camera, but it's still great, and even the kind of effects where it kind of whizzes through the screen is still holds up pretty well, which I was quite surprised about. But I think they have actually invented a bullet which does go around corners now. So, as I said before, these things are becoming science fact. And I'm sure they don't need a really great gun like his, which interestingly, in the poster for the film, in the VHS video cover, it was actually Tom Selleck holding that particular gun, even though he never uses it in the film.
I suppose it does look that good, though, that they don't have to worry about continuity or anything like that. It's let's give our big name the big gun and hope no one notices.
Yeah, it's a shame they couldn't kind of shoehorn a scene where he uses that, because it would have been quite cool, I thought, even if it was for taking out some of the spiders at some point. But even just as an excuse for him to kind of stick it for him to be having it, would have been great for something like publicity shots, etc. But I'm fine. I'm fine with that. It works on that.
It's the equivalent of, I suppose, a Star Wars poster of Han Solo holding Darth Vader's lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So after this, we find that the stash of microchips, because we know that they're evil because they have a red stripe on them, they're being locked up in the secure offices of the evil corporation, and the executive secretary is Kirstie Alley, who we mentioned earlier. She's trapped in the office by what looks like a very weird-looking tease maid that shoots electricity at people.
Selleck tries to bamboozle it by knocking over computer terminals before throwing his sports jacket over it, or someone's sports jacket. So, God, for anyone who's not seen this film, this sounds absolutely ludicrous. But also the way you're describing it, I think, with the the storyline, it actually sounds quite complicated as well for something that's quite straightforward.
But this is the Crichton element, I suppose. It probably, if you take all the ridiculousness of the film away, on paper or in a book, it probably makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but I think that's where its remake kind of status I think comes to the fore, really, because I think if you take all those elements and tighten up some of the loose ends and have, perhaps some more credible people in some of the roles and better special effects, etc., then it's those kind of things that would help lift all those other elements off the page better than they did in the original. But it's still hokey fun.
Who do you think would be considered for the casting? Because all I could think about was who they'd have to get some sort of slightly cheesy big rock star in order to play the villain. I don't really know who that would be. It'd be someone like that, Dave Grohl or someone like that.
I don't know. There's not many rock stars. Again, in that period, there was obviously, cause I know, again, going back to Microchips and If You to a Kill, but I know before Christopher Walken, they were kind of mooting David Bowie for kind of the Max Zorin role and stuff. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be that many it's all gone over to wrestlers, really, isn't it? There's not really.
Yeah. If in doubt, stick Dwayne Johnson in it.
Yeah, or Dave Bautista if you can't afford him.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure he would.
I'm not really down with today's music, but I guess the
H from
equivalent.
Steps. I don't know.
Yeah, H from Steps. I was thinking Noddy Holder.
Yeah, no, that would be something else. Or perhaps the guitarist from Roxette, I think would be quite good.
And I guess I suppose you'd have. I mean, it probably wouldn't be as diverse or bizarre if you had someone like Kiefer Sutherland. It'd be too much like Jack Bauer, I guess. Well, this guy's name's Jack, isn't it?
It would almost be quite nice if it was someone who was in a cop show at some point. So I don't know. Matt LeBlanc's not doing Top Gear anymore, and obviously he was briefly in Mac and Cheese. Obviously another robot, so perhaps he could be in it. But funnily enough, he'd probably work quite well in something like that. But would they have to? Obviously, that'd be in the Selleck role. But I don't know. Would they have to have a moustache?
I don't know. Maybe if they did it as a tie-in with Movember, and over the course of the film, the moustache had to grow.
No, that would work. And perhaps you could actually have Tom Selleck as the villain this time round. It's actually a sequel, but a reboot. So he's got that pissed off at kind of fixing all these kind of toasters and tease maids that it's made him kind of flip.
The next part of this is where, as you say, Kirstie Alley describes Gene Simmons. Again, I'm using actor names, but it's more fun. She describes it. He's evil. You don't understand. So they have to, of course, go and get him. And because it's an 80s film, Tom Selleck walks into this what looks like a hotel suite and sees a topless woman just happily applying her makeup, because that's how all women do it. And Penny from Dirty Dancing, or Karen Thompson to give her a character name, she bursts into the office, and Gene Simmons is in there with some goons who I believe are there as sort of potential buyers for his new technology that he's developing. And it becomes a really strange little shootout, because he sort of shoots a couple of the coppers, he shoots Penny from Dirty Dancing in the arm, and runs off to a waiting helicopter, because every villain in the 80s had a helicopter. Now, she's quite lucky because all the other coppers died, and yet she got shot and appears to be reasonably fine. She's not been shot with a bullet, she's been shot with an unexploded rocket.
Yeah. I must admit, I didn't recall that it was an unexploded rocket, but now you're saying that obviously the other cops, they all kind of exploded off camera, etc., because you did hear them kind of blow up. So I did wonder what was going off there. But yeah, I mean that whole scene is actually it almost seems like it's in a different movie. It seems like it's out of like one of the 80s Death Wish movies or something. But it's obviously it's all kind of there to kind of put the partner in peril and kind of get Selleck to kind of question the use of state of the art in brackets technology to help save her, because he sort of says that he doesn't want a robot to kind of save her, he wants to kind of do it himself. So it's a bit like the sort of toilet scene from Lethal Weapon 2, where he kind of helps save her and sort of dons the sort of bomb-proof vest and stuff like that. Selleck really does lose his shit in that scene, and actually I think it's the first time. It was quite shocking. It was like, Selleck is a good shouter. He should shout in more scenes, I think, in more films and things. But you know, he actually does use the F word, which was quite surprising, and it was like, clearly that wasn't on BBC One when they screened it back in the 80s. It was a genuine surprise to hear him not only kind of raise his voice, but also to kind of drop an F-bomb while saving someone from a bomb.
This is, again, a scene, and as you say, there was tension, and it felt like it was quite removed from the silly action. And as we mentioned before, where the overhead projector was holding the family hostage, and the cameraman there went in with Tom Selleck and obviously got shot for his trouble. And I was wondering if this is some sort of thing that they also looked at in a lot of 80s movies like The Running Man, where everything's on TV, everything's fair game to be broadcast, and almost like in the current climate where everyone from genius to idiot has got a mobile phone with a video facility on, where all things happening are going to be shared on Sky News or Twitter or whatever within seconds. And again, you know, even though Tom Selleck said, right, no one in here, just me, what's that? Oh, it's a remote TV camera. And he just kind of had that acceptance of,
Yeah. So I think it's all those kind of things. You almost take those kind of things for granted, didn't it? I guess at the time they would have appeared more odd and science fiction, whereas now you don't even notice it. It's like they're carrying automatic weapons, but at the time, police in America weren't carrying automatic weapons. So it's those kind of things that, you know, you just take for granted, because obviously not long after that they were, or they certainly were in films anyway. So it's all those kind of little things that have almost, I guess I can't believe I'm going to say this, I guess it's almost a bit like watching Citizen Kane, in the way that I can see your acceptance of that, in the way that a lot of the methods and ways of doing things, so that's more to do with the way it's shot, but the methods and ways of doing things were kind of that new for Citizen Kane, that it was surprising and fresh at the time, but we're that used to kind of those tropes and things that now they're not the most successful analogy.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight, things look normal now as to what back then looked shocking and surprising. It's, you know, everything from the TV cameras everywhere to the drones.
Yeah, although Gene Simmons still looks shocking and surprising.
They did seize a bullet from Gene Simmons' little hotel suite. This is where they realised that they have the technology to actually aim this bullet, if you've got the right gun, at individuals based on their heat signature and all this. That's when it started getting really sort of almost conspiracy theory type, where they could have a bullet with every police officer's name on, and this, that, and the other. And then the really bloody weird bit was when Tom Selleck goes to see a psychic.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming.
No, she did. But
Yeah.
it's kind of, yeah, it was a bit. It was sort of like, oh, hang on, it's like they've just drugged someone out of Poltergeist for it or something. You know, it was all very Tangina, but it was I don't even know really how or why that fit in.
Hopefully that'll be in the director's cut, because some of the stuff she was saying was like, oh, you might have been brothers in a previous life, and that was just that was Derek Acora level shite. That's the sort of psychic you get on Phoenix Nights or something. It was just just quoting psychic by numbers. Is there a Mary in the room?
I'd almost erased that moment from my head. Yeah, it was only you mentioning it now that it's all coming back to me. But I must admit, I don't remember it from when I originally watched it. So I think certainly that you could take that scene does nothing. You could take it out, and it's just odd.
I think it was in the Dead Zone where Christopher Walken had some sort of psychic powers, and that's when the police went to him to try and find this sort of killer rapist, but at least that was explained. Yeah,
definitely. Love that film. By the way, it's great.
That kind of threw me out a bit, and I had to rewind it to sort of think, did I miss the part where this was introduced? Nope.
Because they just sort of like seem to go to her, and she's kind of like dousing or something. She's got like some implement, but yeah, it is. You say it's like something at The Conjuring. It's not. It doesn't belong in that film. That's for sure.
No, not at all. And this is at the police station where Kirstie Alley is in custody, or at least in protective custody, and she's describing Gene Simmons as this kind of Blofeld-esque villain. That he's terrible. He's got his fingers in all these pies. He'll do this, that, and the other. And it just seemed like, no, but you're talking about Gene Simmons. Like, get a grip, woman. It's really, really weird, because then that's when they go into the whole scene where they start searching for bugs. He has phoned into the office, and they establish that he's actually hacked into their CCTV system, which I suppose is quite new technology for them.
Yeah.
But then
I think only the A-Team could have managed that back in 85, 84.
And obviously they quickly follow that, but in sweeping each other for bugs, it seems a bit gratuitous that Tom Selleck doesn't have a bug on him, Penny Dancing doesn't have a bug on her, and shove Kirstie Alley in there with her huge 80s hair, and she's got a bug there. Oh, right, we're going to have to take your top off now, and right, so there's you in your bra, and right, there's a bug in your bra, take your bra off. And then we see a lot of scars on her back, so suddenly she goes from possibly a complicit partner into perhaps a victim of domestic abuse or something like that, and I guess that was probably in there to invoke some sort of sympathy for her.
Yeah, I must admit I didn't have any, to be honest, but I think that was probably just her performance, really. And also, I'd not really forgiven her for her poor performance she was shit in Star Trek 2 as well. So I think it was just, generally poor performance, to be honest.
But their idea of moving her to a secure location, and bear in mind, she obviously still had the gizmos that could attract the menagerie of killer robots. But then they stuck her in what is basically a Johnny cab.
Yeah.
And that was just a weird little scene where Tom Selleck tried to move from one car to another at 50 miles an hour on the freeway. And had it been Jean-Claude Van Damme, it would have been an excuse for him to do a splits in between. Thankfully, his moustache did the hard lifting there.
Yeah, I didn't mind that scene. Again, I thought it was better than what I remembered, and I think as well because there just seemed to be wave after wave of the sort of mini bombs on wheels that were kind of chasing them, that were kind of honing in on the car, which had a laser gun on it, which that was kind of a neat kind of thing. initially I thought there was going to be like 3, but it just seemed to be wave after wave. So I think it was it's quite a neat little action scene, really. I think because it was like remote control devices, it kind of had that kind of echo of the Deadpool as well, which, you know, I mean, everyone knows isn't a classic Dirty Harry film, but you go back and watch that today, and probably the best bit in that film is the remote control car chase. So it's remote control car chase. So I think it kind of evoked those kind of memories for me as well.
It's funny because those killer robots looked like a cross between remote control cars and the old sort of dial-up modems.
Yeah, I'm surprised they got up to speed then if there were dial-up modems.
If Gene Simmons has invented killer modem vehicles that can travel at presumably 60, 70 miles an hour, you know, why isn't he sharing this technology with everyone? He's obviously in the pocket of other evil corporations to keep it down.
Or maybe he'd just gone down the Betamax route and he kind of wanted to, you know, his was the better product, but he kept it to himself. Well, I think that was probably his downfall.
Once they've made this, they've survived the gauntlet of the killer modems, they go to a sushi restaurant that questionable, sort of racist, almost, the way everything is programmed with a cartoon Japanese accent.
Yes.
Which I will not recreate. But there's the sort of standoff where Gene Simmons has kidnapped Penny from Dirty Dancing while Tom Selleck, who had a massive crush on Kirstie Alley and her hair, they try and do a swap for these sort of blueprints for the red stripe evil microchips. Doesn't really go to plan because she doesn't live very long.
No, I think she was, like you say, you know, in that kind of Bond style, she was kind of set up as victim. Yeah. But I think because it was Kirstie Alley and because it kind of almost was indiscriminate and came out of nowhere, you didn't expect it to happen in a sort of a crowded restaurant, really. So outside restaurant, and if I don't know what city it was filmed in, but because I know there's that kind of like waterfall. I'm sure there's more than one city with these things, but it looked very similar to the waterfall at the end of Deadly Pursuit, which she was in with Sidney Poitier and Tom Berenger as well. It could just be a kind of similar looking one, but I'm sure it was that same kind of location and stuff as well.
You need to have a death scene in some sort of water feature, sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. But it was good. It was kind of upped the ante and sort of, you know, all bets are kind of off, and it did kind of show how unhinged Gene Simmons actually was.
You know, basically he sort of kisses her and then stabs her in the back of the head. It's pretty ruthless, even for Gene Simmons.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. He could have stabbed her with his tongue.
Yeah, I think that was probably a deleted scene. But at this point, so Tom Selleck is trying to pursue Gene Simmons with his blueprints for these killer microchips, and they end up tracking him to a public toilet where he'd implanted a tracker into a toilet roll. He doesn't seem very complimentary, and I know it's difficult, but the police officers who find this tracker, I mean, it's not their fault that he put it in a bog roll.
I think he's just feeling the pressure.
He is. And then another standard 80s movie trope where the really ridiculously attractive woman, but let's make her nerdy and give her Deirdre Barlow glasses. She's killed in Trap 2 by another robot spider who sneaks in.
Yeah.
Bad end.
I think those scenes certainly, I know, got you kind of checking. Again, sounds wrong. Sort of checking when you were going to the toilet, checking sort of men's cubicles and things. You know, we were always taught to go to the cubicles because it was safer. But after Runaway, it wasn't. It just didn't seem
like
safer.
Dumb and Dumber as well.
Yeah, that. I think it was probably that, and also Witness scared me shitless. Well, it's kind of like a kind of limerick of sort of toilet cubicles. So I think it's that kind of 80s kind of as well. So I think between them, Witness and Runaway made me decide to wait to go to the toilet until I got home.
You were like that kid from American Pie who couldn't go in a public toilet.
Yeah, probably.
Well, after Deirdre Barlow has been murdered by the spider, we find that Gene Simmons has got himself a police uniform and an eye of some sort. I don't know, because the computer systems in the future are all done by retinal scans, which, to be honest, isn't that different from the old Face ID thing on the new iPhones.
No.
I'm not sure how he gets that eye, because was it in Demolition Man? I think they had something similar, and Wesley Snipes just ripped someone's eyeball out.
Yeah. Again, it kind of screams of like missing scenes somewhere, doesn't it? Maybe got it from the psychic.
Again, didn't see that coming.
No.
So he logged into the secure police system and sees Jack's son, who, as you already mentioned, was the whiny little sod from Flight of the Navigator. We have the personal peril to Tom Selleck because Gene Simmons is after his son. Now, it had been mentioned earlier on when Tom Selleck was trying to get in the pants of Penny from Dirty Dancing that his wife had died in a car crash fairly recently. Being a police officer, it's implied that he spends a lot of hours away, and this child is basically being raised by a domestic slave robot. They go to the house because obviously the first thing they do is look for, is it Billy or Bobby?
Some of them were going to be, I think.
Yeah, bastard.
They always were.
Yeah, Gene Simmons has basically ripped this robot in half, and to the point where we get the line, because obviously they're trying to get some information from this robot about what's happened, and they get the line that, oh, well, she's losing a lot of fluid. We need to get her a bloody Castrol GTX transfusion. It just seems that, I think that actually made me laugh out loud.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not cheap, and obviously the child had some kind of emotional attachment.
Well, this is a Series 12 robot of some sort, apparently, according to earlier on when Penny from Dirty Dancing's mum only has a Series 10 who burns the toast.
Exactly.
And the robot described, it was Lois, the robot, wasn't it? Described Gene Simmons as an extremely unpleasant man. So then we get the kind of the showdown. Gene Simmons speaks to Jack, saying, "Come alone to the construction site. I've got your son." Do you want to go through this? Because this, I think I was still laughing at that she's losing a lot of fluid line.
Well, obviously it's the same site it was at earlier, and actually, funny enough, it looks similar to kind of like one of the lifts he has to get in Three Men and a Baby when he's doing another similar kind of thing at night, but this time swapping some drugs for a baby. But obviously here he's trying to save his son's life, and it's established sort of from the outset that Selleck's kind of got
a great fear of height, vertigo.
Vertigo, yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's established early on that sort of Tom Selleck's got vertigo. So it is almost like Crichton's trying to kind of ramp it up a little bit and kind of link it kind of back to Hitchcock. So obviously that kind of scene has to happen where he has to conquer, to save his son, he has to conquer his sort of like innermost fear, which is kind of his fear of heights. So obviously that's exactly what he does. But obviously while he's up there in things, he has sort of spiders and things to contend with, and he finds that he's kind of hanging outside the sort of lift that's on the edge of the building and things like that as well. So it's all kind of quite high octane stuff with some not bad sort of blue screen and stuff as well. So I think it works quite well, and there are kind of scenes of mild peril there, but obviously it does kind of it's that kind of like Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, sort of like right back falls type stuff going off as they kind of battle on top of this building and with the lift. And obviously, as all good bad guys do, Gene Simmons gets his comeuppance as kind of like the lift kind of goes right down to the bottom, but at that very bottom, his sort of pet spiders are there waiting for him. But obviously, being robots, they have no allegiance and kind of fell in full of acid, and then they kind of explode, taking him with them. But he's obviously the big ending, rather than just one sort of spider. It's kind of like loads of them kind of pumping him full of this stuff. So obviously he goes with a pretty big bang. But not a bad ending, I didn't think, and it's kind of suitably B-movie, and it's what we all kind of wanted, really. Although I'm surprised it didn't bring his bloody gun with him, because then he could have just polished Tom Selleck off in the lift, no problem. But obviously, that would have been a different ending.
But he did have the gun, didn't he? Because he stood over him with his...
Oh, actually, that's true.
On his chest. Yeah.
He did, yeah. So, yeah, actually, yeah, that makes no sense.
I guess this is the kind of part that I know gets parodied a lot now, and the sort of Austin Powers thing, where it's, why not just kill him? Is it, no, I will leave him for an overly elaborate and exotic death.
Yeah. But, you know, I suppose that kind of film lends itself to that, because it's what we all kind of want anyway. And we know it's all going to end. So it's the fun is the journey and getting there, I guess.
The weird thing I found was Gene Simmons has been killed by these spiders, and Tom Selleck goes to kind of just, right, let me just make sure he's dead. He gives off this sort of one final scream.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just completely like, I thought it'd be like, would it be when the Carl from Die Hard, you know, we all thought he was dead and he came back with his gun and everything else. But this was just a... Oh, he's dead. Oh, he's dead again.
Yeah. No, that was a bit odd. But I suppose, again, we've got used to that, so much to that kind of back from the dead ending, which everyone seemed to kind of use, certainly in the 80s, that it was kind of, I guess it was meant to be a final kind of jump scare, but it wasn't really.
It was did they have such a thing as a laugh scare? I don't know.
They do now.
Yeah. And then, of course, despite Tom Selleck's somewhat over lusting after Kirstie Alley, he does end up going, well, for dinner, really, with Penny from Dirty Dancing, when she suggests they go for dinner. And he's basically saying, can you cook? I don't know if there's misogyny going on there or what. But, and they kiss for pretty much the duration of the closing credits.
Yeah, that, obviously he got his dinner. But I think he asked about the can you cook, because I think that because obviously his robot's knackered. Obviously he's got no one to cook for him now. So obviously I think that was probably why he was asking. I think it was... Yeah. Obviously, he's not. You know, he's no James Bond. He's been able to whip up a quiche.
Quiche de Cabernet.
Yeah.
Whip up some burnt toast.
Yes.
But and my thing as well, I suppose, is for the duration of those final credits while they're kissing, she must have some terrible moustache burn.
Yeah. Yeah, if she'd had to come back to her next film and do reshoots, it'd have been like the opposite of Henry Cavill in Mission Impossible. In Justice League, they'd have had to kind of rubbed it out afterwards.
Yeah,
moustache burn, obviously.
I was hoping, you know, and I suppose this would be a bold gamble if they were going to chuck some sort of futuristic line in at the end, and it would have been really scary if he said, how about we go for dinner? And she just said, Netflix and chill.
Yeah, well, you know, that really would have been kind of ahead of its time. I think, talking of ahead of its time as well, I think one thing we've not touched upon is its music. And like a lot of things in the 80s, not amazing films had some great people scoring them. So this is Jerry Goldsmith. And actually, if memory serves, this is his first full electronic score, which obviously lends itself quite well considering the kind of subject matter. So I think the music was kind of you could tell it was Goldsmith, and I think it kind of lent itself to it and kind of again helped raise the bar from the film it kind of actually was.
It did seem to work really nicely, I think, and this is the part where it wasn't overbearing, but it kind of, in a way, when a film is looking at the future, and this is the problem where even if the music is written beautifully and composed beautifully, if you stick a load of synths in that, it's immediately like, right, 80s. It was the same with Blade Runner, for example. You know, that's supposed to be set in 2019, so I'm amazed they didn't have some sort of One Direction or X Factor bollocks. But
stick a bit Atari.
Just stick a bit of synth in there, we'll be fine.
Yeah,
that won't date it at all. People in this decade will still be loving it.
Well, I suppose Hans Zimmer still likes a synth or two.
Yes, well, he's been around. I suppose in the 80s he was composing the theme tune to daytime BBC One game shows. So.
Yeah, hard to believe he went from that to like Black Rain and things. But yeah.
Right, so that was Runaway. And before we sort of go and we'll talk about what you do for the Daily Jaws, I just want to thank you very much for encouraging me to use the iTunes gift card I got for my birthday and buy this film. And it was really, I'm not going to lie, it was crap. I bloody loved it. I really enjoyed it.
It was enjoyable crap, but, you know, as I've said a couple of times in here, I think it's the sort of thing that really is, you know, especially with drones and everything, and kind of, you know, I'm sure it'll never be available on Amazon Prime, on Prime Video, because, you know, they'll be fearful that kind of Alexa will kind of go a bit AWOL and do all sorts of things that are in here.
Burn your pasta.
Yeah. But I really do think it's the sort of thing that, you know, is that bad it's good, and has some real core ideas to it, and really could be remade, or whether it's a sort of a Netflix movie, or whether it's sort of theatrically released. I think it's the sort of thing that's kind of got the scope for that, and not too many people are aware of it, like your good self. So I think it's the sort of thing that could really get, you know, some new fans and things. Definitely a cult classic.
Well, hopefully when it's remade with Matt LeBlanc and The Rock, we'll and maybe a cameo from Tom Selleck, we can all sit down and enjoy it and see what they have planned for our future in, I don't know, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah, we definitely need a Selleck cameo, or, you know, or perhaps it can be some hybrid 3 men in a little whatever kind of spin-off. You know, that'd be quite good. Get Selleck dancing and Guttenberg battling robot spiders. That'd be worth seeing.
I'm not gonna. I don't want to tempt fate or anything. I know Guttenberg is an '80s legend, but I'm sure he's probably available.
Definitely.
We've got quite a few more lined up of these. Yeah, we might eliminate the tech gremlins at some point, but I know in the future we've got all sorts to come, haven't we? The two of us. We've got Big Trouble in Little China, K9, The Untouchables, Young Sherlock Holmes. There's a wide variety going on here.
Definitely, that's a great evening's entertainment. So I'll be having lots of fun, even if no one else will be. But I know my daughter, she's sort of like almost 8, but she watched Young Sherlock Holmes for the first time the other week, and she loved it. So it's great that, you know, some of those 80s films, perhaps Runaway isn't one of them, but you know, that some of those 80s films do stand the test of time, and are kind of being passed on to the next generation.
Oh, excellent. Well, maybe we'll have to convince her to come on and give her a little review of it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's probably more coherent than me.
We'll see. As long as she's not high on Haribo or whatever 8-year-old kids are into.
No. I wonder what he said then. I thought he said something else rather than Haribo. But yes.
Lovely. Well, Dean, thank you very much for joining the Betamax Video Club again. I'll be taking this one back to the video shop with pleasure. And just to finish off, the song that was #1 when this film was released in the UK, 21st of June 1985, was You'll Never Walk Alone. So if you're a Liverpool fan, stick with it. If you're not...
This podcast is part of BritPod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritPodScene.com or BritPodScene on Twitter to find out more.